Hey everybody, welcome to the first Database Security Office Hours of 2025. I'm your host, Richard Evans. Notice the new blue shirt. It's a darker blue shirt, an upgrade for 2025 since it feels like we should be in the future, right, Chris? It's 2025.
It's definitely the future. It's the kind of this is kind of the time those magazines like in the 70s would say, we're in the future now, right? And here we are.
Exactly. It was like in the year 2025, and here we are. So it's
Mhm.
a cool new shirt. So, hey everybody, if you haven't joined us before, welcome. My name is Richard Evans. I'm a product manager of Oracle Database Security, and I'm joined by my friend and colleague, Chris Saxon. Chris is a developer advocate here at Oracle. So he runs several more successful blogs and videos and YouTube channels and all sorts of cool things related to SQL and what you can do with SQL in the Oracle database. So thanks, Chris. Appreciate you joining us, man.
It's great to be here, Rich. Thanks for inviting me.
This call is being recorded. We will have this video up on asktom.oracle.com in the next couple weeks or so. You can get this video plus three years, 5 years, however long we keep them, of videos out there on asktom.oracle.com of me in the old blue shirt if you want to see that one. But going forward, new blue shirt 2025 right here, baby. So we've got these recordings. If you have not joined us before, welcome. Thanks for joining us. We hold this call on the second Wednesday of every month. So 10 a.m. US Central, 8 a.m. US Pacific. We have announcements. We have a technical topic. Today, Chris and I are talking about some neat things, and then an opportunity for you to ask questions. We'll do our best. We can't always get to the questions, or I may not know the answer. We can follow up with you. We can take this offline and continue the conversation. But please join us next month on the second Wednesday of every month for this Database Security Office Hours. Okay. Some announcements here. I'll paste this in the chat. I put all the links and things we talk about on this GitHub page. So I try to keep this current, and I just uploaded the scripts that Chris is going to walk you through today. So you can go through that and kind of work with these capabilities yourself. But you'll see the Moss notes, the blog links, the live lab links, interesting things out there. Maybe a link to Chris's blog or something we'll put out there as well. So, but this GitHub page has 2+ years worth of kind of a cheat sheet for you there. Okay. We talk about patching every month. It's important to stay on top of patching. Patches will come out again on or around the 21st of January. You can check out the proactive patching program. You can check out the recommended one-off patches in My Oracle Support. You can go to oracle.com/security-alerts for information on, hey, those October patches that hopefully you've applied already, as well as those upcoming patches we've got there too. If you're using RAC, check out Fleet Patching and Provisioning. You can create gold images of your grid infrastructure and your database. Hopefully that'll make your patching a little bit easier there. The patching team has done a fantastic job with that tool, and it's really neat. For basically everything patching and upgrade related, Chris and I talked to Mike Dietrich, right? So check out MikeDietrichDE.com for information on that. He's the expert. We go check that out, and we learn something new from Mike every time we look at his webpage. Okay. We talked about this last month as coming soon, and now it's available for you. So Oracle Key Vault 21.10 is available. And one of the really cool things that Peter Wall and team have integrated is this ability from your Windows workstation to SSH into a server, but not have that key on your operating system. You can essentially check it out from Key Vault, utilize it to get into the server, and then not have that key on several different workstations that you have available there. So cool stuff. Some template for implementation to help with key management. So starting with DBMS crypto, customizable ports available too, and then a couple additional platforms that customers have asked to have that Oracle Key Vault client on, Z-Linux and then ARM64. Okay, so check that out. Peter Wall also has a blog out there that you can take a look at. This is in that link, that GitHub repository that I'll paste in the chat again in case you came in a couple minutes late. But check out Peter's blog. Also released in December was Enterprise Manager 24 AI. That's pretty cool, right? 24 AI has come out, and relating to data masking and subsetting, you can see a new interface, kind of some new screens, new pages, kind of a sleeker looking visual workflow for you there. That subsetting is still getting updated. So those subsetting pages is still the old UI, but the data masking is the new UI. And check out Kajol's blog. So also, again, in that GitHub repository, you can check that out. And Kajol is on top of it. She's already updated her live labs to use Enterprise Manager 24 AI. So you can go to livelabs.oracle.com and run the latest Enterprise Manager and walk through data masking and subsetting. Pretty cool stuff. Okay? This is a blog from 3 years ago, Chris. Whoa. I wrote this blog 3 years ago in January, and it talks about getting things into shape, right? So, hey, everybody's got New Year's resolutions. Do you have any New Year's resolutions, Chris?
I generally just, try and avoid specific resolutions and just generally try and be a better person every day. But, there's, I think I don't want to be one of these people who sets lofty goals and then by the end of February is like giving up on all of them, right?
I think I'm with you. I'm with you. I a lot of times do my New Year's resolutions in December so I can give up on them before anyone even starts. So I
That's a
figure
great
like,
idea.
hey, I've already done that. So I'm moving
Yeah,
on.
I
But
do
but
agree.
but don't give up on this goal, guys. Okay? So 3 years ago I wrote this blog. It's basically, hey, it's a new year. What do we want to prioritize? We need to know where we're at, what we're doing before we can start to plan. Maybe we've got some projects that we want to implement. What's the assessment of our database look like? Use DBSat, use DataSafe, use a third-party tool, understand what's going on, where that PII data is, all that stuff. So while Chris and I may give up on our New Year's resolutions here by February, you won't. You're going to continue getting your database security into shape. So, and to help you with that, we've got 40 plus database security live labs out there for you to kick the tires on. So over half of them you can do on our dime. So you can spin them up as a green button, go through them. You can go off script. You can do just about anything on there except mine Bitcoin. Unless you're going to share with us. But um, if you want to go off script on a database vault lab or a TDE lab or a key vault lab, go for it, right? You can spin those up and then you can learn and get your hands on this technology. So you could spin up one of these labs and then go through the scripts and the steps that Chris is going to kind of talk you through today as well. So good opportunity to get hands-on experience with Oracle database security products. Okay. Chris, let's kind of kick this off here, man.
So yeah, so we're looking at how we can manage access control and things like that, aren't we? So I think it's a common problem that those of us who've been DBAs at some point have kind of had to deal with, and that's the developers write some horrible query that it's like running for hours, and they come crying to the DBAs and say, "Oh, will you please cancel my SQL statement because it won't stop?" And please help me out. I'm sure you've been there, right, Richard?
Oh yeah. Yeah, yeah. And I want to make it so like they could do it themselves too, right? Like, hey, I don't bother me with this, right? Password resets all the time. All the time,
Mhm.
drive-bys. Password resets, hey, my session is hung, my session is running, my whatever, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's all these kind of little admin tasks which just consume time, right? Because the developers don't want to wait for the DBAs, and DBAs don't want to be interrupted and have to do these kind of basic tasks. So we
Yeah.
want to make it self-service, but we need some powerful privileges to do this, right? We
Yeah.
don't want to have to go out and grant alter system to all our developer users because they can't just they can cancel SQL statements, they can kill sessions, they can change parameters, they can do all sorts of potentially dangerous stuff, right?
Yeah, yeah. And I think, Chris, we've got a solution for that today, don't we?
Yeah. So yeah, we're going to look at various ways. What we want to do is we want to build like a PLC call API to do this. So we're going to build some routines. They can call a procedure and pass in the details so they know what they're going to kill. Right. There's a lot of questions about how we actually manage the privileges for this PLC call, right? Because there's things like invokers versus definers. How are we creating this package in the most secure way so that developers and potentially even more lower privilege users like support users can actually do what they need to do without, but only what they need to do, so we don't give them escalating privileges. So
Yeah,
that's what
without
we're going
that
to look at.
alter system privilege, man. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
exactly.
Cool. All right. All right. Let's jump into invoker versus definer rights. And we're going to quiz y'all on what this means. All right. So be ready. I don't have a poll because a poll would take us a little too long. So I want you to put it in the Zoom chat. If you're feeling like you know the answer, you can reply to everybody. If you're a little hesitant, well, maybe you're like, well, I'll just send it to Chris and Rich because I'm not sure about this. But if you're being bold, like a bold new t-shirt here, then you can send it to everybody. All right. So here's the first one. Who provides the alter system privilege when Alice executes this procedure? And I'm going to highlight a couple things here for you, right? We've got admin owns this procedure. We've got an auth ID listed. And then we've got Alice that actually runs that command there. So we've got admin here, we've got auth ID here, and then we know Alice is the one running it. So who is going to provide these privileges? Put these in the Zoom chat here, guys, and let's see what you
Yeah.
get.
Who's brave, right? And who's going to be brave and announce our answer to everyone, right?
Brave. Oh, we've got some. We've got some that say definer admin.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, we've got some that don't want to say publicly. They just want to send it to us. All right. All right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Admin Alice. Do we have Alice? Hmm.
Any takers? I'm not seeing any takers for Alice yet.
Yeah. All right. Let's move admin. Y'all are right. If you said, oh, we had somebody who was brave to say Alice. All right. Auth ID is definer, so it's not Alice, right? In definer's rights, the procedure runs with the privileges of the owner, not the current user. That's that auth ID definer, right? So in that case, Chris, admin has all those privileges.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Okay.
yeah. All right. What about this scenario? This scenario is basically the same thing. Alice executes it, but that auth ID says something a little different here, right? It says current user here. Boy, that's a terrible circle. Let me rewrite that.
We could tell you like over a current user just about better
Yeah,
than my
you know.
circles would be.
Yeah. All right, who do we got? We've got some for Alice. We've got, oh, some for Alice, some for Alice. Oh, all right, man. We're going with everybody. I like when we see the everybody responses.
Yeah,
Alice. All right.
it's good.
Yes, Alice. Current user means invoker rights. It confuses me sometimes because we say invoker definer, but then we say definer, auth ID definer, and auth ID current user. So
Mm,
it confuses me a little bit, but just know that invoker's rights mean when you say current user, it means invoker's rights. So that's Alice's privileges. So in
mm,
this case, man, we would have had to grant Alice alter system.
yeah, that sounds bad.
Ooh, that doesn't sound like something we'd want to do.
Mm,
All right, how about this one, guys? We're trying to trip you up a little bit here. All right, same exact scenario, but here with this as, it doesn't tell us. It's just
mm.
it's just right here. Let's see. Is that a question mark? Yeah, that's a good enough
It's,
question
it's just about a question mark. I think it's a question mark. Yeah,
mark.
yeah.
We've got Alice. We've got
And we've got
admin.
ooh,
Ooh,
yeah,
it's a toss-up.
split vote. Yeah,
Right.
anyone else feeling brave?
Yeah. Yeah. All right. It is admin. By default, if we don't specify, all procedures are considered definers' rights, which, Chris, I think makes sense because when you create it, if you create it as admin, you have to have the privileges in
Mm,
order to compile it and create it.
exactly, exactly. Yeah,
And that
yeah.
makes,
It makes sense to me, right?
yeah, that makes sense. I think with this one, like, although we'll get into it, like this here is dynamic SQL.
Mm.
So that changes things a little bit too. But yeah, let's get into it. And Chris, you got a demo that talks about this, right?
Yeah, so let's look at this. Let's actually try and build this API a little bit. All right, so I will bring up my thing. So hopefully you've got my screen there.
Yep.
And to start off with, we're just going to run as our admin user. So DBA admin, and we're going to create our utility package. So it's admin utils, auth ID, definer, so definer's rights. And then for now, we just got three procedures: canceling SQL, killing sessions, and unlocking users. So this is going to be the API. So we created that. Now we're going to actually implement it. Now notice, as Rich was saying about execute immediate dynamic SQL, you can't have static alter system statements in PL SQL. In order to run DDL, we have to use dynamic SQL. So we'll talk about this a bit more later, but again, we just need to be a bit careful. Okay, so we'll do that for altering system, killing sessions, and altering our users. Now, I've got this DBMS assert here to make sure we're safe from SQL injection and things like that. So we've got that compiled, and we can check what the definers versus invokers settings are, or definers versus current user, as we were saying. So we got our auth ID column here. We can say they're all definer, and it's defined at the package level, so they all have the same setting. All right. So DBA admin has a role to actually, which gives them alter system privileges, so they can cancel it. Now notice it says missing or invalid session ID. That means well, there is no session for it, but they do have privileges to do it. If we didn't have privileges, then we'll find, as we do like this, we'll get an insufficient privileges error, right? So why is this? All right, so what's going on here? Well, we have the thing via a role, but in order to run code with definers rights in PL SQL, we need direct grants. So we need direct access to alter system. Okay, so that might be something we don't want to actually grant out directly. So rather than definers rights, we're going to change auth ID to current user, invokers rights. Let's just double check we did it. There we go. It says current user rather than invokers, just something to kind of get straight in your mind, as Rich was saying. And now, because this now runs with the current user settings, so in this case, DBA admin, we saw they could do alter system standalone. So again, this works. So we've got missing or invalid session ID. If there was a real session with these values, then it would actually say if it's cancelled or whatever the cancelled was successful, error message it or messages, or actually would just work. I can't remember now. I'm trying to remember. Okay. So we've created our API. So at this point, we want to try and actually give it to our developers, our developer users. So they need execute privileges on the package. So let's do that. They can execute the package. Let's move over here. So we have got our dev user. That's who we are connected as. Let's try and run it. Boom. Uh-oh, it doesn't work. Why doesn't it work? Well, our dev user doesn't have alter system privileges. We're running as current user. So we're using the privileges for dev user who cannot run alter system. Okay. So how can we get around this? Well, one thing we could do is we could create a role. So we'll just create cancel SQL role, and then we're going to grant that to our developer user and allow that role to use alter system. Okay. So we've done that, and now we go back to our dev user. Now, first up, notice I'm going to set role all. If you change somebody's roles, their active sessions don't necessarily pick those up immediately. So this just kind of resets everything and makes sure we've got their currently active roles. Yep, role all succeeded. And now, hopefully, this will now work. Yeah, missing or invalid session ID. So because the user has the permission via the role, which we just granted out here, we can now call the package. Sounds great, right? Well, sort of. We've got this nice API, but they have it via the role, so they actually have the alt system privilege, so they can just do it directly. Oh, okay, that was actually what we didn't want to do, right, Rich? We didn't want to allow them to do this. So it's we've built our API and actually not really solved the problem, right?
Yeah, we kind of like we want Alice or dev user to be able to do this, but hey, hang on a second. Wait, man, we gave you too many privileges, right? We gave them those too many privileges that we were saying, hey, we didn't want to do that. So let's see. Okay, let's kind of recap here. We've got definers versus invokers. Definers uses that code owner's privileges.
Mhm.
Invokers uses the caller's privileges. So I mean, you could argue one is better than the other, or depends on the situation, I guess. In this situation, we don't want to give that invoker that alter system command. So
Mm.
on the other hand, if it's running as definer, then that dev user, that Alice, that end user kind of has whatever that definer has, right?
Yeah, and we're DBA, right? We've got like full DBA privileges, so
Yeah.
potentially pretty much anything, right?
Yeah, yeah. So a little squirrely here, but we've got a solution for this. We can meet in the middle, I think. And now
Ooh,
we're going
yeah,
back to a quiz.
yeah,
Let's see what people know about this so far, okay?
yeah. Okay.
So if we're using definers rights in our PL SQL, what about those roles, right? We saw that those roles were enabled when dev user was the invoker and the invoker was created, the procedure was created as invoker. But what about
Mm.
definers rights? Are these user roles enabled? Would that be enabled
Mm.
if it was given from our DBA admin? Oh,
Mm. Good question, right? If we're running with definers rights, what roles are the roles active?
yeah,
Well,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah. Anybody want to take a shot at this one?
yeah. People
Yes.
are a bit more hesitant with this one, aren't they? I think it's
Yeah,
like you
this
have
one's
to
a
think of
hard,
it.
this is a harder one. Uh, let's go with no, right? Roles are not enabled during definers rights PL SQL unit runtime, right?
Mm.
So we've got that where they're not. And Harm says roles belong to a session. From PL SQL, there is no session. What do you think of that, Chris? I think that sounds
Yeah.
pretty good way of running it, of saying it, with the caveat there of except anonymous blocks. Okay.
Blocks. Yeah, good point. Yeah, good point on
Yeah.
anonymous blocks.
Yeah. Yeah. Good feedback. All right. So no. All right. What about with invokers rights? With invokers rights, are those roles enabled during PL SQL
Mm.
runtime? Well, I mean, I think we saw this, right? We saw this
Mm.
happen. And
Yeah.
so when Chris ran this, we saw that that role was enabled with invokers rights when we set it to current user. I keep
Hmm.
wanting to say current session, but it's current user. Always, yeah. So current user. Okay. So yes, it is. Okay. So now what about roles granted to a PL SQL unit here?
Mm. Interesting.
So this might be something where people say, well, what are you even talking about? You grant roles to a user, Rich. Like, right?
Mm.
You can't grant roles to PL SQL. You can, man. And this has been around, Chris, for, you know,
Because like at least 10 years, right? It's
yeah,
12, I think it was 12-1, right?
I
So
think
at
it was
least 10 years.
12-1. Yeah, 12-1 for this. So it's been around for a while.
Mm.
And I think Dan Morgan and I talked about this a little bit a couple years ago too. But I forgot everything since then. So it's good to reevaluate
Yeah.
and to know like what it is. So, yes, right? Code-based access control roles are enabled for both that definer and invoker because the database role is granted to the PL SQL unit. So it's granted to
Mm.
that function, it's granted to that package, it's granted to that procedure. Chris, can we make something out of this, man? Can
I
we
think so. I think this sounds like a solution here, right? A way to kind of do kind of what we want to do, um, and actually get our code up and running, so we can get our dev user running this package, but without actually having alter system
Yeah, we don't
privileges.
want no alter system granted to end users, please.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, that's a security nightmare waiting to happen, right? Okay, so yeah, so just recap. So we're running with invokers rights. That's what we had over here, and that just kind of that worked. But we can also bypass it. We really don't want that. So we could change the package to be definers rights and then grant our admin direct, the alter system privilege. But as Rich was saying, that means we're now running with all the privileges of DBA admin, and they've probably got, alter system, drop user, alter user, a whole stack of things which we don't necessarily want to be able to expose, or we want to be certain that we don't expose, right, to end users. Okay, so this is where code-based access control comes in. Now, first up, before we get there, let's just make sure we've reset and make sure our dev user can't do this anymore. So they can't, oh no, we need to reset their roles. And so insufficient privileges, right? So they definitely cannot do this. So what we're going to do now is grant the role to our package, our admin utils. Now, you also need to make sure that the code owner has the role as well. I mean, they should have it because they created it, but just kind of, belt and braces, make sure they definitely got it. So DBA admin it. So we've granted the role to the package and the user. So let's just verify that, right? So we can look in role privs and see who has it. And we can see, indeed, DBA admin is the only one who actually has it. You might go, well, where's this package grant gone then? How do I see that? Well, it's a bit of a mystery, right? Well, there's this new set of views, DBA and all, and so on, code role priv views. So we look at ones for the DBA admin, and the cancel SQL role has been granted to the admin utils package. Okay, so those are the things that have the privilege. Yeah. So Joseph, did you say granting roles has been around since 12C? Yes, this has been around since 12C. It's been around quite a while. Yeah. Okay. So let's just so we've done that. Let's just check this does actually work. And yet we can see missing or invalid session ID. So we're able to do that. And we are still running as current user, Invoker's rights. So let's just set role all. Let's just make sure we reset the role there. And our dev user can also do this because the role's been granted to the code. That means while we are running the code, the role privileges for the role are active. However, dev user does not have this privilege generally. Alt system gives insufficient privileges error. Okay, so this is kind of where we want to be, right? This is looking good. We've got our code-based access control. However, we might want to tighten this up a bit more, right? It's nice that our dev user can actually cancel SQL statements without having to bother us DBAs, but they can cancel anybody's SQL statement, right? Maybe we don't want to allow that. Maybe we want to be sure they can only cancel their own SQL statements, right? So what we're going to do in the package is we're going to have a check to make sure that the session they are trying to cancel is actually for that user, right? They're not trying to cancel somebody else's thing and just annoying all your co-workers or something like that, right? So first thing to note is in order to do that, the code for the DBA admin needs access to $$ session, right? Because we are going to have some static SQL which checks the user against the SID and the serial hash, okay? And because this is static SQL, DBA admin needs a direct grant on $$ session. So, here's one I did earlier. I'd already granted that and set that up there. So we can create this to check that. And then we're going to just call this before actually doing the alter system. And if it returns false, we're going to give them, that's not your session error. And we'll do something similar for kill session as well. If it's not your session, then you're not allowed to do it. So we can tighten things up a little bit further here. So we've done that and we've got that up and running. So let's try and run it. But, there's a problem. Dev user does not have query privileges on $$ session. So if we go up here, like this, because we're running as current user still, Invoker's rights, dev user needs query privileges on this. It's like, okay. Well, I just kind of prove that we are on current user there. So we probably, again, maybe we don't want to grant out $$ session access. So let's just make that auth ID definer so we can pull that in. Now, one little caveat and one thing to be very aware of here, we've recompiled the package. That means we have lost the code-based access control role. Okay, so this is a very important thing to be aware of if you're changing your code, which I'm sure we'll do relatively frequently, right? And deploy new versions and fixes to it. by changing the package spec, we've lost that grant. So we need to go ahead and re-grant it. Missing privileges are always one of those annoying things that are easy to overlook and trip up otherwise working releases. So make sure you just double check this. So we've done that and make sure that works. So we've got that's not your session. It's a non-existent session. So we'll just say, oh, you can't, doesn't exist. And then we go back over to our dev user. Again, they can say that's not your session. So we can see that is now working. Okay, so at this point, I think we should just have a little recap of what privileges and user you're running as when you're doing this different thing. Because we've got Invoker, Definer, and then we got code-based access control for each of them. So we kind of got a grid of 4 things. So what we want to know is we've got our cancel SQL role, and we want to know the session user and the current user. So the current user is who the code is running as. Okay, so we can use this context things. So on my DBA user, do they have the cancel SQL role? Yes, they do. They are the DBA admin and so on. So we're going to create a set of series and packages, which they just call this basically a set of procedures, I should say, one for each combination. So we'll just do a basic definers rights and check if it has the role. Then for invokers rights, check if it has the role. And then we'll do exactly the same, but these CBAC ones, we will also grant the roles to those. So we'll put those in there. We're granting the roles to those. And I will do this for both the DBA admin and the dev user, because you'll see things look a little bit different depending on which user are. Okay. So we've got our objects and just kind of recap definers, definer, invokers, current user, and then the CBAC versions of those. And only the CBAC roles versions have the role. So again, just make sure we're on the same page and we're following along. So our DBA user or DBA admin has the cancel SQL role. Okay, so let's run those. And this is where things get a bit interesting. We had that question. If you are definers rights, are roles active? No, they're not. They are false, right? They don't have, although DBA admin has the role, it is not active in the code, right? If we are definers rights. However, when we are invokers rights, it is. This changes for code-based access control. Has role is true because we granted it to the code and it is active and only active while that code is running, okay? So this is the key difference here, right, between these. Has role, whether or not the role is actually active, whether it's code-based access control. And in all cases, it's DBA admin, which is kind of unsurprising because it's the code owner and the session user. Let's try and do this as our dev user. So let's just bring that a bit more into focus. So dev user does not have the role. They did have it, but we revoked it, remember? And they are the same thing, session and current user. So this is where things are a little bit more interesting. So again, definers rights, they don't have the role, okay? So the role is not active. However, the current user is DBA admin. We are actually connected as dev user, but because we're definers rights, we're running as DBA admin. Again, with invokers rights, we don't have the role. The user doesn't actually have the role at all, okay? And in all instances, we're dev user. However, with both the code-based access control ones, the role has been granted to the code. It's active while the code is running. So in all cases, that role is active. And again, notice the different user for definers rights, but same user for invokers rights. Okay. So there we go. So this is a comment from Joseph. So I guess best practice would be to include those grant statements in whatever script is being used to define the PL SQL unit. Yeah, that's probably fair. I think so. Yeah. I think that's a good call.
Yeah. Chris, let me bring up a slide here because I'm still trying to kind of wrap my brain around this. So we granted the role to our DB admin. And we granted the role to our procedure. Okay, so invoker, we've said makes sense because in this case, when it runs as DB admin, it has the role.
Yep.
Okay, here it doesn't, it's not running as, it doesn't have that role when it's a definer because that definer's rights role is not enabled. Okay. And then here, these are both enabled for CBAC for code-based access control because we granted it to that procedure.
Hmm. Sounds right.
Okay. And then, like Chris said, this is the interesting one. Now we're dev user. We're dev user. And when you're invoker, it makes sense that your current user and session user would be dev user. When you're definer, it's running essentially as the admin here, even though you're dev user, but it doesn't have either of these roles granted to it.
Hmm.
So the power of CBAC is that these checkboxes are true here. We granted it to the procedure, therefore, regardless of invoker or definer, that code, that PL/SQL unit has the role and the privileges associated with it. Is that sounds pretty cool, man.
Yeah, yeah, does sound cool. So we've got an interesting question. Is a code granted role switched off when the grantee calls another PL/SQL unit without the grant? So I guess we've got like CBAC definers, for example,
Yeah.
that calls something else, right? And as far as I understand, the role is still actually active for the duration of the top level, whatever the
Yeah.
role owning thing is. Now, this can get a bit complicated if you've got lots of different codes and different users. I'd have to check that actually. Let's think about
Well,
it.
Chris, we might be able to kind of check that or have that checked with our next section, accessible by stuff, because we call
Hmm.
other things. Do we have a role in there, or are we just no, we're just doing
We're just doing accessible by, yeah.
yeah.
Let me fiddle around for a minute while and
Yeah, we can solve that. We can solve that. Okay, cool. All right, so what we've got is we talked about definers' rights, uses the code owner's privileges, but on the other side, uses the code owner's privileges. Invoker's rights uses those callers' privileges. It's limited to those callers' privileges, but we don't want to grant that caller, that invoker alter system. So, yeah, code-based access control is kind of the perfect match between the two. You can grant the privileges to that role, grant that role to your PL/SQL, then it can be used for either invoker or definer's rights there. So kind of the best of both worlds there. I like it. All right, Chris, you had two things in there that you were showing. You were showing and you said you can't do DDL as
hmm
static SQL.
that's
But then
correct.
you
Yeah.
also called $V session. So you had to make sure you hard coded that grant because you did that as static SQL, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So we
Yeah.
we we're kind of creating a table here that compares the two. All right. Static SQL, whatever Chris wrote is what it runs. That dynamic SQL, well, if you're not properly sanitizing that code, you could end up with, that where one equals one. It could be a little Bobby drop tables scenario here, right? Where we drop the table and we didn't really mean for the user to be able to do that.
Mm, yeah.
So static SQL can use invoker or definer's rights. That dynamic SQL, the cool thing was if Chris had made the $V session query and the alter system query both dynamic, he wouldn't have had to grant admin that read or select on $V session. He could have granted it all to the role instead
Hmm.
because it would do that at runtime there, right? But um, we kind of we kind of kick the problem down the line a little bit. We talked yesterday about how, hey, when you do static SQL, it checks dependencies right then. When you do dynamic SQL, you could think everything is perfect, put it in production, and then realize like, oh no, it's just failing constantly because you
Mm.
didn't you missed some grant or something there. Especially, Chris, you've worked on tens of thousands of lines of code and
Oh yeah, I've been there. I've seen a deployment fail because somebody forgot a grant and nobody could figure out why. So the whole thing had to be rolled back, and then in the like wash up, it was like, we forgot to do this. It's like,
yeah,
oh.
yeah. At least with like static SQL, it'll tell you like, hey buddy, you forgot to grant a privilege on this. Dynamic, on
Mm.
the other hand, says, hey, it's cool, but when you go to run it, man, then we've got the issue. So, you know, we've got a lot of checks for positives on dynamic. I think that first check, that X, could be a little bigger because you have to make sure you sanitize the inputs. You have to make sure you know what you're doing. And then we could add another check on there that was basically like checks at runtime, not at compile time. So that could bite you in the end.
Mm.
So, all right. I think we've got ability to kind of limit what we want to have access to here, right? So like right now, anybody and everybody could um could run this cancel SQL. So on the right side, you mean compile time? Okay, did I say it backwards?
No, yeah, I think that's it's fine. I think it's just mean, yeah, because they don't require the privileges at compile time. They do at runtime.
Right.
Otherwise, the
Right.
code won't work. Yeah.
Yeah. Privileges are checked like at runtime here, right? And privileges are checked at compile time for static.
Yeah.
Am I saying that correct?
That's right. Yeah.
Thanks for the clarification. Okay, so, okay, assuming proper privileges, who can execute this procedure in the package? We've got Alice again. We've got admin. They're both executing the same SQL. The procedure is here. It, ooh, what is this? And then what does this run as, right?
Mm.
This is the as, so it's whatever the default is. So we've got that here. So Alice, admin, both run the same procedure. It's a part of a package. We didn't specify invoker or definer. And then we've got
Mm.
some dynamic SQL in here too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So assuming everyone, all the alter system, all the necessary alter systems been granted here,
Yeah.
who can run it? Alice, admin, both, neither. Mm.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Let's see. Both of them. Both of them can run it because it's definer's rights and admin has that privilege. And it is just a package and a procedure, right? So let's go a step further now, right? Now we've changed this just slightly. That code in the procedure is the same, but you'll notice we have this new little clause here, this accessible by limitation here, right? Who can run this procedure?
Yeah. This is a bit more interesting, right?
Yeah, yeah. And I can make an argument a couple different ways, I think, right? So if we're
Yeah.
calling the cancel SQL and then calling this, but this, what do you call this? An accessor list?
Yeah. Yeah. An accessor list, right?
Yeah. So this accessor list here tells us something a little bit different. Does anybody want to
Mm.
take a guess at what this is and how this works?
I think people are sensing a trap here, right? They're kind of, yeah, they're like,
That's right. It's the Star Wars meme. It's a trap, you
yeah,
know?
yeah, exactly.
All right. It's a trap. It is a trap, right? No one can execute this, right? And this is interesting. Not even the procedure owner here can execute that. And that's
Mm.
pretty wild, man. Like, it's pretty wild that you can make it so even the owner of the procedure cannot execute that procedure. I think it's powerful. I think it shows the ability here. So then maybe we don't end up in this, well, if it's a definer, then theoretically they could execute it. No, no,
Mm.
no one, right? No one can directly access that procedure, not even the procedure owner admin,
Mm.
right? Chris, you got a demo for us, right?
Yeah. All right. Let's go. Let's look at this in practice. Actually, before I get to that I'll just kind of cover off this question about what happens when we've got like nested calls to each other. So I updated the definers code base access control to call invokers and definers, and if we run just that, let's just clear that out. Make sure we're starting from scratch. So you'll see that with code base access control, we have the role, unsurprisingly. But with definers, we don't have it, right? So we've gone into this bit and we've lost that role. However, with invokers, because with Invoker, we're still running with whatever privileges of we had when we started doing this. That does where's it going? I'm losing my screens here, right? You can see that does have the role. Okay, so the answer is it depends. Okay, so you need to be kind of careful here about how you got nested chains. I think the key thing here is if it's defined as rights, then you lose any roles you had before, unless you've also granted them to the code itself. Okay. If you are invokers rights, you keep whatever roles and privileges you had before. So that's the kind of fundamental difference here. So is a code switched off when the currency calls another PL SQL? It depends, right? It depends whether it's invokers or definers. Anyway, so hopefully that covers that off for you, Sergius. All right. Anyway, let's move on and let's come back to this. So we had our dev user, but we also want to set up a support user. So we want to give them even fewer privileges. The only thing they should be able to do is unlock users. So we'll just check their support user. And at the moment, they can't even call the package. So nothing works. So let's set up unlock user with CBAC. We're going to create a separate role for it. And this needs a separate privilege, alter user. So we do that, we'll grant that, we'll grant it to the package, and we will grant execute on the package to our support user. Set the role to all. Behavior is compatible with your intuition. Good. Well, I think it's a good sign on the right lines then, right? Anyway. Okay, so I've called the package, I'm dev user, DBA admin, sorry, I'm DBA admin here, and I'm calling the package. User doesn't exist. That's because I had that DBMS assert check, make sure we weren't passing in some SQL injection nonsense here. So we've got permissions to do it. Okay, so let's go over to our support user. And again, they now have permissions to do it because they've got it via the role, okay, via the code base access control role. Okay, so all good, right? We've allowed them to unlock users. However, this is a package and the control is managed at the package level. Access is managed at the package level. So our support user can also go ahead and cancel sessions and also kill sessions potentially as well. So whatever code we stick in this admin utils package, they can potentially execute. They can execute all of it, which doesn't sound great. Even code base access control doesn't help us here because we've got different users with different sets of requirements. We want some of them to execute everything in the package and some of them to only execute some of the things in the package. Imagine over time, this package is probably going to grow to have things like reset passwords, maybe some other admin level tasks that we want to make more self-service to developers. But there's different levels of control we want to give here. So as I say, it's a powerful package, but it's an all or nothing grant. You can't grant to just a procedure in a package. You either grant the whole package or you grant none of it. So this is where Accessor lists and the accessible by. And again, this is something first introduced in 12c. So this is a long-standing feature. It's been around a long time. Hopefully all our customers can use this now, right? Hopefully. Anyway, so the way we use it is we have this accessible by clause. And in here, we can just put a comma separated list of anything, right? There doesn't have to be something called cancel SQL. We can put any text in here. There is no check against that. We've got kill session. So essentially, we're going to create wrapper procedures for each of these to kind of give more fine-grained control. So let's create that. We've added the accessible by. We also need to reflect that in the package body as well. So we need to update that as well. Definers and invokers, we just define at the package level. Accessible by, we need to define at the specification and the body level as well. So make sure I did that. There we go, we've got that in. Now, as Rich was saying, the really interesting thing here is DBA admin, even though it owns the package, it still cannot actually do this. Nobody can call these things directly now, okay? Insufficient privileges to call cancel SQL, insufficient privileges to kill session, insufficient privileges to unlock user. absolutely nobody can call these directly. The only way we can do it is to actually create those wrappers with the name matching it. So first up, just again to recap, we recompiled the package, so we lost our CBAC roles. Let's just regrant them, make sure they work properly as intended. So we'll create our cancel SQL procedure. So that matches the accessible by name we had, and voila, it now works. Okay, so we can do the same for unlock user. Again, unlock user, that now works as well. And now, because we've got them as individual procedures, we can grant access to those separately or individually. So we can say the support user should only be able to unlock user. So let's do that. Our dev user, we want to allow to be able to unlock users and cancel SQL. Right, so let's go back to our support user, just make sure their roles are all reset. And again, just kind of confirm they cannot call these packages, these procedures directly. We can only call the ones they've got permissions on. So support user can unlock, but they can't cancel. Yeah, they don't have execute privileges on it, so they can't run it. And they can't do alter user either, because they do not have that privilege. We've got it via the code-based access control. We go back to our dev user, just recap on that one. Again, they can't call the package. They can unlock the user. They can cancel SQL, but they can't do it directly. They can only do it via the APIs we built for them. So I think at this point we've met our objective, right, Rich?
Yeah, I think so, man. That is really neat. We've taken something that was like, the DBA has to do this. They have to be involved all the time because they don't want to give the privileges, and then kind of figured out how we can learn definer versus invoker, and then utilize the benefits of each in its right situation. And then, add in that code-based access control. So we grant the roles and the privileges to the PL SQL, and then limit, like you said, hey, within this PL SQL package, not everybody needs to do everything. So you could add checks in there to know who they are, what role they have, what user they are, lots of different checks. Pretty much any check you want there, right?
Mm, yeah.
Benefits of a package, grouping it together, right? Makes it easy to find that procedure or function. Hey, let me do a describe on utils and figure out like, all right, which one? Oh, okay. It's called unlock user or unlock session or unlock account, as opposed to trying to guess with that procedure of where is it? What is it? So
Mm.
easier there. Chris, can you explain this one?
Yeah, so it's not something we really talked about today, but there's various reasons why package-based development is preferred, and one of them is if you invalidate some code. So if you just use procedures and you invalidate one of them, then basically they'll all break. The whole code would be broken.
Uh,
Whereas if you deploy a package body change and it's got some validation in it, that stops all the things calling it from also being invalidated, right? So you haven't broken the whole world. Obviously, if you try and reference whatever that thing that's invalid is, you'll still get a runtime error. It still won't work, but it means that you haven't broken things unnecessarily. So
okay.
it just helps manage the dependencies a bit better.
Ah, that makes sense. Yeah. The downside of packages, all or none, right? We showed you all or none.
Mhm.
Procedures execute on individual procedures or functions, but we figured out that accessor list, that accessible by, is what makes that last one not a red X for packages. So we can add in that accessor list. So typically with a package, you've just got coarse grained, all or none. With that accessible by, we can fine tune that a little bit on who can access it. We've got execute privileges for unit versus no top level calls to unit. Chris, can you explain what you mean by that?
Yeah, again, so as we saw in the demo, literally nobody could access that. If you're doing an exec or calling it, or you just want to access it from SQL or just a begin end prompt, code block, anonymous block, you can't. Nobody can do it. It's
Yeah.
only nested within something that is listed in that accessor list. Okay, there is literally no other way to do it.
Yeah. And that accessor list can have multiple
Oh
options,
yeah.
too, right? So yeah, we're
Yeah.
not just limited to like a one-to-one relationship there.
Hmm. Exactly.
Cool. Okay. Kind of the best of both worlds, man.
Mm.
Like combining all three of these together really gives us a lot of control over when it runs, who it runs as, what privileges it has, and then who can access within that package. But
Mm.
we've got one more pop quiz here because there is something you need to be aware of. So, like,
Mm.
let's say we create that protected function that's only accessible by our run function. Now, our run function is going to run three different ways here. So we've got Alice, who runs select protected function into the variable. We've got Bob, who uses execute immediate. So we've got static SQL versus dynamic SQL, right? And then we've got Jane down here who runs it, and just basically the output of a protected function is inserted into that V integer variable there. Okay. Are all of these valid? Can you do all three of these?
So putting them hard, tough questions at the end, right?
Yeah, this is one of those where like you're like, okay, well, we learned about dynamic SQL and we learned about static SQL and we kind of learned the difference here and maybe oh, and one of the other cool things you might notice here is Chris is using the 23 AI capability of not adding the from dual on here.
Mm.
So this
Yeah,
is 23 right here. So
absolutely.
yeah, but that doesn't change anything. The reality is the only way you can access it is directly with number three. So you've got to call that procedure directly. You can't use dynamic SQL. You can't use that static SQL. You've got to call that protected function or procedure directly from it,
Mm.
right?
Yeah, yeah.
So,
To be aware
something to
of,
keep in
right?
mind.
Yeah.
Something to keep in mind here. So, all right. Um, Kind of summarize, right? Auth ID, depending on definer or invoker, your code-based access control. Been around, all of these have been around since I think what, 12.1,
Hmm.
probably 12.2 is a better version for accessible by. I think there were some updates in there.
Yeah.
And then yeah, granting roles to code. That's so cool. And then, hey, within there, we want to limit who can actually unlock users or reset passwords or maybe manipulate tables or indexes or do partition management, any of those kind of things that you may want to do. And Chris, you've talked to some customers who build these kind of PL SQL packages and create these
Mm.
kind of APIs for their admins and developers, right?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. It was interesting. We were already discussing talking about this, but I was at a conference towards the end of last year afterwards, and I think it was at least two people mentioned that they build packages kind of like we just built now to do these kind of things, so it could be more self-serve for their developers.
Yeah, it's cool. And then, we could bring Jeff Smith and folks into the conversation around Apex and ORDs, right? Like, so you could
Mm.
API some of this stuff too, you
Yeah.
know? And so how cool is that? That you could be able to do some of this stuff, PL SQL all the way out to web-based services or REST calls as well.
Mm.
So,
Yeah, yeah.
cool. All right. If you guys want to learn more, Live Labs, again, these scripts are out there on our GitHub repository. So if you go out to the Ask Tom GitHub page and you scroll down to January 2025, you click on it, you'll see that Chris has got 4 scripts in here that kind of walk you through those different scenarios. And then we also have notes in here. So our anything new, the links, so that all code role privs that Chris was talking about. Hey, I think you used user code role privs.
I use different, but yeah, it's like the that kind of DBA user all set of things views there, right?
Yep. Same thing. We've got links to like kind of definers, invokers, the accessible by clause, granting roles to programs in the code here. And then the video will be available, in the next couple weeks probably. If you're subscribed to the session, you'll get a notification saying that the video has been posted. If you're still waiting on it or you're not subscribed, please subscribe, or you can email me and say, hey, where's that video at, Rich? So if you have any questions, follow up with us. We're happy to have a conversation about this. And yeah, I'll stop the recording, hang out for a couple minutes, and we'll see you guys next month.
See ya, folks.
Thanks, Chris. This was great.